Hello, thank you for accepting this invitation to our second permanent talk on universal access to information. In this occasion, we have a guest who's going to talk about the importance of using learning resources. And I'm going to give a brief biodata of all the work she's been doing and all her studies and all her professional life. It's a well-known person of all of us. However, I'm going to read give a brief biodata of what she's been doing in her during her last 30 years of professional life. María Cass has been a teacher and a teacher training for over 30 years. She's a full-time professor at the School of Foreign Languages at the University of Colima. She holds a BPhil in ELT and a MA in teacher training for ELT, both from the University of Exeter, UK. She has a PhD from the University of Southampton in the UK. Her interests include teacher development, educational resources development, autonomous and independent learning, and professional identity development. Welcome to this talk, Maria, and thank you very much for accepting this invitation.
Thank you for inviting me. That it's a pleasure for being here with you.
Great. Okay, so we're going to talk about the importance of using learning materials, learning resources, sorry. And before we start the questions about, or before we start the talk, I would like to ask you a question about why are you interested about this topic? Why learning resources?
I guess, Fernando, it has always been an interest of mine, the idea that teachers, any teacher of any subject, but particularly language teachers, should make use of everything that is in there around them to help students learn. So the idea of using learning resources in the classroom it has the finality or the end means of helping people learn differently, more efficiently, in a friendlier way, I would guess. And my interests relies on the fact that we tend to believe that there's only one way of learning or one way of teaching. And now after la pandemia, I think we have learned, one of the learnings that I have gotten from the pandemia would be that before the pandemia, we had this image or this idea that by using electronic resources, I was going to be the solution for all the problems in learning. But then pandemic hit and we realized that it's not true. Mm-hmm. That we need to find the balance. We need to have a balance between things that you can touch and feel and do and electronic things. It cannot be only one way or the other. It has to be a combination of both things, I think, no? So right. My idea is to help students. One of my interests right now is to help my young trainees become aware that all ways of teaching are good ways too. Like it's going back to the basics, basically.
Interesting. How important do you think learning resources is in the process of teaching or learning?
I guess, Fernando, it marks a difference between something that it's by rote, something that is obligatory, mandatory, to something that is enjoyable. If you as a teacher, if you as a trainer, or you as a professor use learning resources in your classroom, you get the students closer to knowledge, I guess, to the idea of learning something, no? And the more things you use, the better for your students. The more they experience or experiment with a topic or the language or whatever, they get better at it, no?
Okay. Well, I have a few questions about, I believe you have read different authors or literature about the topic, and I'm sure that you know what all these experts say about it. So based on that, reading you've done about this topic, and obviously based on your experience as well, we're going to have a very interesting chat about all this. So the first question I would like to ask is, what do we understand of by learning resources?
I guess in my experience, the learning resource is basically any resource you use in the classroom with the purpose of somebody learning something. It has to provoke learning in a student. But in order to define learning resources, a learning resource is not just the object. It is a combination of the object and an intention for learning. Like having an intentionality, like the intention, whenever you bring something into the classroom, it has to be with the intention to help students learn something. And that intention can be translated into an objective. If we want to talk in layman's terms, we can say that the intention is defined by an objective. If you don't have an objective for something in the classroom, it can help students learn something, but it doesn't exploit the potential of a student, like the learning potential that the student has. No, you have to, we're going to use a term that one of my colleagues uses all the time here in the Facultad de Lenguas. It has to go with jiribilla. You have to create things to get it into the classroom with the intention of getting students to learn something. Okay?
So there should be a purpose.
Yes.
The learning purpose.
Yes, the learning purpose is very important, or the learning objective, as whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so there should be a, we can say, a combination between the learning source and the goal or the objective of the class or the lesson.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So it's not only the learning resource per se. It's not alone.
No, because I tend, sometimes we go, for instance, there's a very, an old example that I like using. A long time ago, way in the day, I went to a very important presentation by a very famous author. And this author had, on his presentation, he had like a cardboard with all these red, beautiful apples on it. And I saw it and I'm like, oh, I want one. So I work on this this cardboard with all these apples on it. And I spent about a week. I even got my mother and my brother and my sister cutting apples, and I even get angry with them if they didn't cut them specifically exactly the same. They had to be perfect. And I finally got my cardboard with all these apples. And once I had it, I'm like, and what am I going to do with this? Because I didn't have any intention for it. I didn't know what the purpose of this cardboard was.
Just so like the apples.
Yeah. And I ended up with a beautiful postcard with all these apples and no purpose at all. So basically that tends to happen to us sometimes.
Okay, so in other words, if we have a purpose or an objective, we can say that probably any learning resource could help.
Yeah. Even rocks can help. Wow. Let me tell you that.
Interesting. Well, we're gonna talk about that later.
Okay.
So, well, what role do learning resources play in the language classroom?
Oh, it plays a very important role because it's the vehicle through which learning takes place. In a sense, it is the way or the means through which you provoke learning into your students, So I think they are very important. It doesn't matter what kind of learning resource you take into the classroom. Sometimes you are limited only to a blackboard or a whiteboard, or you are limited to a textbook, but that's a learning resource in itself, no?
And and what can you see? What can you suggest to our students who are watching this and listening to this talk about using a learning resource in the classroom, for example?
I think in a sense, learning resources are motivators also. It is a way to ease your way into the classroom for students to be more open to learning. You know, if they see you coming into the classroom, if we're talking about children or young adolescents, if they see that you bring material into the classroom, they perceive their class as being prepared. They perceive you as someone who cares about their learning. You know, it's also psychological, Fernando. I think the better prepared you are, or the better looking your resources are, the better receive the learning that you are trying to get into your students. It is not the same bringing just a piece of paper or asking them. For instance, I was telling you that the other day to some teachers, and they were saying, oh, I was giving them the idea of having these whiteboards done with a piece of cardboard and a white piece of paper on it, and just you plastify it. And then you have like these personal whiteboards. And I was telling them, if you make them yourself and you put them away, you bring them into the classroom and the students get really excited to be using these whiteboards, you know? And then one of the teachers said to me, but I can ask them to do it themselves and bring it over. And I said, yeah, that could work, but it has some drawbacks to that one. Because if you ask parents to do that, to help them do that, in a sense, parents are going to expect you to use it every single day. And if you use the same resource every single day, it loses its power, it loses its magic. See what I mean? So sometimes you need to invest time and effort, because it's more time and effort than real money, really, because these cardboards are like cereal boxes that you can cut, or just the Amazon boxes that are right to your house. And you just stick a white piece of paper, like a letter size piece of paper. You cut them that size, and you put some contact paper, and you have whiteboards. And they last for a fairly long time, I would say. And they're easy to carry, easy to transport. And children or students, even adolescents or adults, love to have things that they feel are special for them, no?
Yeah, so going back to the idea of learning resources as a source of motivation, we can say then that they are some sort of learning spark.
Mm-hmm.
So they provoke, right?
Yes, I think so. They are sparks. They provoke learning. In a sense, also, the more studies there are about development, not only children's development, but adolescents' development, it says that people learn through their senses. The more senses are involved in learning, the more likely it is that the learning becomes significant or meaningful for the student, no? So we need to appeal to all their senses.
Okay, yeah. So learning learning resources is a way of doing that.
Yeah, I guess it is, Fernando, because even a worksheet that you have, you can do worksheets in many different ways, but sometimes you can have a matching exercise with just making lines or writing the numbers. But sometimes you can have a matching exercise where you have the on the bottom things that they have to cut and they have to transport and paste. And it's the same, it is the same principle. It is the same reading exercise, but it involves other senses. It involves the idea that they have to cut things, they have to match, they have to paste. So then you're appealing to other ways of learning in a way, no? And it doesn't take a whole lot to do that.
Yes, interesting. So do you think we can classify the learning sources in different types?
I guess you can, but sometimes these classifications can become blurry. The main classification would be visual materials, for example, and those materials can be anything that you perceive through the eyes by looking at things. For example, flashcards, cards, posters, videos. But then we have videos which also blur the line between being visual and auditory. There are other materials that are called auditory, which are things that they listen to, that they have to listen to things in order to produce learning in them. That would be podcasts. Even the voice of the teacher becomes a tool in the auditory types of materials. And then we have the ones that are tangible or manipulative materials. There are things that they need to move, they need to transport, they need their hands in order for them to learn. It can be as simple as having a worksheet that they cut and paste, or they can be having Play-Doh in the classroom. They can be having like a feely bag where you put things inside and the student has to put their hands and try to guess what it is. It can be things like they have to move around the classroom looking for information around. But these materials, by being tangible or manipulative, they can also be visual and can also be auditory. See? And the other main category that exists are worksheets. Is what we call paper-based materials. But also paper-based materials can have different purposes. So in a sense, they're broad categories, but they're not very well-defined lines between them.
All right. What about new types? You know, we are in the time of technology, and in times of technology, and what do you think?
Also technological materials, like for example, during the pandemic, it became very common for people to use Kahoot, for example.
Okay.
And Kahoot is highly visual. It's highly visual. Sometimes it's auditory because you listen to things and they have to react to the things. But it's still a visual material. It's still an auditory material. It does fit within them.
Okay, I understand. So do you think that in some way this new type of resources, by new I mean the technological resources, can be used instead of the other types of resources you mentioned before?
I think they should be used, but not instead of. I think they should be used in combination with. Okay? Because people are still people, old, young, whatever. If you have too much of some things, it gets boring, it gets tedious, because by having all these technological tools, and I'm referring to computers and everything that you can use on the internet and things, it requires for people to be sitting down in front of a screen. Any type of screen. It can be the cell phone, it can be a tablet, it can be a computer. But it requires people to be sitting down and being static. See what I mean?
Yes,
Whereas when we have materials that are tangible, it allows for movement. It allows for more personal interaction between people, no? I'm not saying that technological materials are bad. I'm just saying that you should combine the two. You should find a way to combine. We should find a way to combine both. because sometimes it is okay to ask the students, okay, students, you have a work, an assignment where I'm asking you to watch this TED Talk and react to it, or just tape yourself and upload it into Flipgrid, for instance, no?
Yeah. So I was thinking that what implies for a teacher, in this case for experienced teacher like you, to to develop learning resources which are adequate for a class.
I guess I believe that everybody is capable of developing their own resources, Fernando. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But I think the first thing you need to have is intention, or is a willingness of trying things out. One of the things that I've noticed after trying to prepare this, I teach this class at the university, and every time I try to teach this class, I go around and look for things and, sources of information on how to do this. And I have this theory, and this is my theory, by the way, that there are not books or how to design materials as such, because editorials they don't want us to be able to do this thing, because they sell us all these ideas. They have all these beautiful photocopiable books, or they have all these beautiful books where you can get ideas from. And so it's very hard to just find the know-how. I think it is more intuitive in a way. Once you are preparing a class and you're preparing a lesson, the more you prepare lessons, the better you become at it. And then you start seeing potential onto things. And I think it is more the idea of being able to prepare a class better, and then thinking about what materials can help me deliver this idea that I have. And right now, or nowadays, there are many different places that you can go to for ideas. One main place that everybody can go for ideas is Pinterest.
Okay.
Pinterest is full of ideas for other subjects, but then you see ideas there and you're like, I see this for this other subject, but I probably can do an adaptation for this in my class, in the next topic. There's somebody asking a question, no, Fernando?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that yes, we're gonna give a few minutes at the end of the talk for questions. All right, so just write down your questions, have them ready, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions to ask to our guest. All right. Okay. So another question is, how can the learning resources be implemented in a classroom?
They can be naturally implemented. Mm-hmm. Because once, I think that if you...
What do you mean by naturally?
This is what I mean, Fernando. When you're preparing your classes, or this happens to me all the time, like when you're preparing your classes, you visualize like what you want them to do, what you want your students to be able to get from your class. And then you start thinking, if I bring, for example, I have some rocks here that I was going to share with you. I don't know if you can see them.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Nice painting.
There's a set of rocks that it has a name on it, and it comes in a bag. My rocks come in a bag, and they are tell me a story about pirates. So basically, they're just rocks that you paint, and then you bring into the classroom. You bring the rocks and you say, today I want them to practice speaking, but I want them to practice speaking with connectors, to be able to say things in order. So I bring these rocks, and then I ask them, you need to pull the rocks out and in a certain order, and using them, you need to tell me a story. for instance, no? So you basically, it's kind of natural the way you implement the learning resources in the classroom. You visualize what you want students to learn, you bring the material, and it flows in a sense, as long as you plan your classes yourself. If you know what you want them to get from your class, I think the use of the learning resources become natural. I would never, ever, I always tell my students, I would never, ever bring materials that implies for me to dance. There's no way, because I know I am horrible at that. So I would never try to do things that are not natural for me. See?
Okay, so you have, so far you have mentioned two keywords regarding learning resources. One of them is object, or to have a purpose, and planning, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So you need to have a plan of what you're going to do, and obviously if you have a plan, you have a purpose. And
Yes.
obviously another part of this is students, to know your students. But you say it very, very easy. I mean, you say it in a natural way, but because you are very experienced, you are experienced teachers with more than 30 years. So how can
But when I started, Fernando, I remember I kept thinking of, when I was preparing for today, I kept thinking of the beginning when I started teaching. And I remember seeing my first classes and I felt bored by them. You know, it's like, ay, qué aburrida la María. And then I said, no, that's not gonna work for me. So I need to do something because I need to have fun. That was my first motivation. I needed to have fun in order to be able to teach a class that it was from 8 to 9 at night. So it was like, what can I do? And so I started thinking,
in Los Mochis.
yes, yeah, it was in Los Mochis way back in the day. And in that class, in that particular class, I have so many characters in that class, and they were kind of difficult class to teach because I had high school students, but I also had very important people in the community.
You had a cocktail.
Oh, yes, all kinds of people there. You know, some with big egos and some with an attitude, and some with both. So I started thinking, look, you know, they need to have fun. They need to enjoy coming to this class. So I started bringing things with them and experimenting with them. I started with a song and then cutting up the song, and then that works for them. So, and then you kind of get your feeling like what things work for the kind of students and what things won't work. That's the experience, that's the day-to-day, but it's the willingness to try. It's the willingness to bring things into the classroom. Some things will work and some things will be a bust, and you're like, oh, never again.
Interesting. I was thinking that I'm sure you're going to be able to answer this question. Could you think about a few, probably one or two, or maybe three theoretical principles behind all these you've said? Because you've said many different things, and obviously this is like the all the experience you've gained all through these 30 years. But I was thinking that it's not only about experience gained in the classroom, which is obviously this is one part of it, but also you've read and you know a lot of theoretical principles behind all these experience. And could you please share one or maybe two of the theoretical principles?
I guess, Fernando, I've talked about it for a while now. It is the idea of having a purpose, and this purpose is linked with the level of learning you want to instill in your students. And that will give it to us by the types of behavior you want the material to provoke in the students. And that would be an easier way to do it is think in terms of Bloom's taxonomy and at what level of learning you want the material to incite in your students, no? Another principle would be that it should be.
Can we link it with constructivism, for example?
No, yeah, we can link it to constructivism. We can definitely link it to with student-centered learning, Fernando. I think any humanistic approach follows this idea of the whatever you do with the students is for them to be able to get something out of the class. The material should be thought-provoking. I think that's another principle. It should be, if we are talking about some kind of theory behind it, I would say input plus one from Krashen. Krashen is a very old theorist in our area of expertise, but he talks about the idea that whenever you bring something into the classroom, it should be input plus one. And that means that you should have the material that is at the level of the students plus a little bit ahead of them, just one step further than where they are at, in order for them to grow that step, in order to inspire them to learn or to take that small step up.
So there should be some challenge.
Yeah.
Right?
So materials should challenge the students or should provoke learning in any way. Another principle that I can come up with, it is they should be attractive. They should be done in such a way that the student feels special. You know, like they know that you created the materials for your class, that they know that you care enough to bring these materials for them to use, no? And the more you pay attention to those details, the more they take care of your material and they return it in well taken care of, or not broken or missing pieces or anything like that, no? And finally, I think if I was gonna say 4 principles, the fourth one, it should be fun. If you're not having fun as a teacher and they are not having fun as students, don't use them.
Okay, so that's the proof.
Yes.
Okay, one more question. How difficult it is to develop learning resources to help learners learn?
It can be as difficult as you want it.
Okay.
It is
Elaborate.
as easy as that. It can be as easy as to find the right material and just adopt the material. You can adopt materials, not necessarily create the materials. You can go on the internet. There are hundreds of web pages where you can get the materials from, and you just find the right one for your students. Sometimes, many of the times, I adopt materials into my classes, and I bring materials that are store-bought or downloadable. No, that it can be as easy as that. It can be as difficult as having, the other day in one of my classes, we talked about flannel boards. I don't know if you're familiar with this tool. This tool has been around since the 1940s. Let me tell you. And it's a very useful tool for teaching. And we came up with the idea of having a flannel board that it's foldable. In a way, it is a tree, like a family tree, that it's made out of felt, and it has the little people, but it was sewn. The people was sewn. So that took a long time to produce.
Okay.
You know? But you can have materials that are very easy. You just print them, you ask them to cut things out, and you're ready to go. For instance, today we had a challenge in my class, and the materials that I brought into my class were English dictionaries. And I distribute the English dictionaries around the classroom. And I had a number of phrasal verbs, and it was a challenge. I had these bells. I put bells on the table, on the tables. And I said, for example, push up, and they had to find the word on the dictionary. And the team that first find the word, they had to press the button and read the definition out loud. And after that, they just answer the exercises on the book related to phrasal verbs, for instance, no?
Interesting. If we could think about steps, what would be steps 1, 2, and 3, for example, for our students who will be teachers soon to start producing or developing learning resources?
I guess step 1 is to plan a class, basically. It is to have an objective for a class. Once you have the objective, pretty much is a given. Because if you construct learning objectives nowadays, the most common way of doing it is to follow the ABCD of objective writing. And if they follow that, it's like a formula. And it gives you, the A is the audience, which is the students. B is the behavior. C is condition, and there are 3 different types of conditions. One is the material through which they are going to learn, or the means by which they are going to learn. The skill they are going to use in order to be able to learn an area of a language or to practice an area of the language. So there are the 3 conditions. And then it has the idea of how far you want them to learn, to be able to say. And I say that, I use a very mochiteco term for that. ¿Con qué te das, mijito? ¿Con qué te das con tus alumnos? Like, what is the minimum thing that they should learn from this activity that you say, they learn something? Y ese es el hasta qué punto, ¿no?
You feel happy enough.
And once you have an objective, then you can visualize what it needs to be done, what kind of material it needs to be done, because the behaviors, if we attend to Bloom's taxonomy, it is like the student will be able to describe. So the material should provoke description, should allow the student to describe something. The student will be able to assess. So you need to have materials that they can assess things, okay, to organize. So the verb gives you basically the idea of what kind of material you need in order for the objective to be fulfilled, I guess.
Lovely. So one last question before we go to the questions in the chat. How can students find more about learning resources? I mean, where can they read, or how can be more? So what? There's any author that you can recommend, or any book?
Well, the guru of learning resources would be Tomlinson. And there is a magazine that is published, and he's part of the editorial board. It's called Folio. Folio.
Tomlinson, right?
And it is basically about learning resources, so creating and implementing learning resources, or research done based on learning resources.
Okay. So Tomlinson would be a good.
Yeah, es el que se le considera el gurú de esto.
Okay. La vaca sagrada.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Well, so we're going to open the chat for questions. If you have questions to ask to Professor Cass, please write your questions on right here in the chat, so we can read your questions to her. So we have one question from Ana Gabriela. Ana Gabriela Aguirre, are you there? Ana Gabriela, yes? I'm going to read the question to you right now. And also we have a question from Odalis. I'm going to ask the question from Ana Gabriela first. It says, I have children with autism spectrum syndrome in my classroom. It is a classroom with 16 children, 5th grade. From a personal point of view, from your personal point of view, what materials would you recommend to use with these children? Who have a special need? Sorry.
Okay, I would recommend first to learn a little bit more about the type of disorder, or because the autistic spectrum is a very wide one. So I would recommend to go to USAER, or the person in charge of, I am assuming, because you're in 5th grade, and I am assuming that you're talking about public schools. There should be a person in USAER, and that person should be able to tell you what is the characteristics of the particular spectrum or disorder that this child has. And based on that, you need to pay attention whether this boy or this girl is able to sit still for how long. What are the particulars of the child? Basically, it is no different than any other child. You need to pay attention to how he or she learns better. But that information can only be given to you by the mother or the father or the teacher in USAID.
Okay. Thank you. Another question from Odalis Oseguera. What would you say are the most important main elements or characteristics to take into account when choosing the right material?
The things that you need to take into account, Odalis, that is, if you are going to invest money, time, and effort into it, I would say that you can use it more than once. I would never buy a material that I won't be able to use more than once, because that is a waste of your time and effort. Okay. If you are going to choose a material that is finite in use, that means that it's a one-off, you use it and there's no other uses for it, I would try to put it in paper, and students can keep that material themselves. So that would be my recommendation. Choosing the right material, I think it all depends on the group of students that you have, Odalis. And it has to play on their strengths. Because if you want a material to be successful, you need to bring material that your students enjoy using and working with. No?
Okay, and there's a second question related to what you just said. How do we get to choose what the students need?
It's by learning what your students are like, Odalis. By learning, by being involved within them. It's the classroom dynamics, basically, what gives you what they need in order for them to learn. If you have, the other day I was at a talk in an institution which I won't mention the name, and they told me that after the pandemic they made a baseline evaluation of the children, and they found out that children, particularly, usually children are, hard to keep still and sit down and everything like that. But after the pandemic, it's even harder because they have no limits at home or anywhere else. So they come into the classroom, and they, in this evaluation, showed that most of the children are kinesthetic, which is natural for the age anyway. They're naturally kinesthetic. But now more than ever, because they have no limits and no ways of following rules or things like that. So and they say to me, well, but nothing that we do works. And I'm like, okay, and what do you do? And they say, oh, we show PowerPoint presentations. And I'm like, oh yeah, right. Good. That's not the right way, because if you are telling me that your students are kinesthetic, they cannot sit still. Of course, you don't bring a PowerPoint presentation, and much less every day. You will never be able to get their attention that way, because you are not catering for their needs of movement, they need to touch things after so many, well, it's been for over 2 years that they were sitting down and just interacting with a electronic device. They in the mejor de los casos, the mother or the father sat down with them and they maybe helped them color or cut things, but it was basically things that they had to do through the screen, what they were doing. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question, and it's from someone that you probably know well, Seco Isabel. He said, you talked about creating materials that are of great quality. What do you think about involving students in the creation of materials, even though they may not be perfect?
Oh yeah, it is a good resource as well. It depends on the purpose of the material, Seco. I would say that if you want materials that have a finite use, or that means materials that maybe they're going to be used for a unit for those particular children because they are catering for their needs, for instance, in a topic of toys, and you want them to present their favorite toys and then ask other people to learn the name of that favorite toy, they can create their own cards or posters or even their Play-Doh creations or things like that, that becomes theirs, themselves, I'm sorry. And they should be able to use them, but they have a finite use. But the use is only for the purpose of that class. And that it's perfectly fine. You can ask them to create their own materials as well, to be used within the unit, but it's not always, and it shouldn't be. It's the same as saying that as believing before the pandemia that que la panacea to all our ills was going to be having technology in the classroom. La pandemia has come to teach us that it is not the result of all, is not the solution for all our problems. It is a way, it's another tool. It's just another way of doing things, I would say. So it should be a combination. You can have a combination of beautifully crafted materials or materials that they create themselves and technological materials as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any more questions that you would like to ask to Professor Cass? Okay, we have a few students listening and watching this video or listening to this talk, so probably someone else have another question to ask. Any more questions? Okay, I don't think we don't have any further questions. So I think we're going to say thank you again, Maria. It was a very interesting chat we had about learning resources, and we've learned a lot from all your experience. Thank you very much again for accepting the invitation, and I hope we can meet soon and talk about any other topic that I'm sure you are expert in. Many other. Oh, we have another a person, Alex Jimenez. You're raising your hand up. Have a question or?
No, I don't think he has a question.
Okay, no, he doesn't have a question. Well, thank you very much, Maria. Thank you for.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure being here.
Yeah. Okay. Bravo, says Alex Jimenez. And all of you, thank you for attending this invitation. Thank you for being here, and we hope we can meet again probably in February once we begin the new semester, new year. And we're going to have another talk with another professor from the School of Foreign Languages about I think they have many different topics they would like to share with us, right? Thank you
Okay.
very much, and
Thank
have a good day.
Thank you, Fer.
Bye bye.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody. Bye.
thank you for attending. Bye bye. Thank you, Sabala. Thank you, Vani. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.